So good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this open debate on Catalonia. My name is Alina Mungiu-Pippidi, and I'm a democracy professor at Hertie School of Governance. The reason why I am moderating this is that ages ago, I was also a scholar on nationalism who wrote books on former Yugoslavia and things like this, but then I quit this field because I thought that nationalism is gone from Europe, and I moved to other research interests. But as you can see, it caught up with me and my colleague Salvador Parado, who actually had the idea of this debate, asked me to fill in for him and moderate this discussion. We are very lucky to have some guests who flew in from Spain with us, as well as colleagues from Berlin who are joining us in this discussion. And thank you all, those from Hertie School and those from outside Hertie School who joined us. And without any kind of further introduction, we will immediately start the discussion. I suggest that, Argelia, do you want to start? Okay, so what I would like to do is to introduce our guests before their introductory statement, one by one, rather than all in the same time. So we are lucky to have Argelia, Queralt, Jiménez. Is this an approximation of my Spanish translation? Sorry. Who is an associate professor of constitutional law at the faculty of the Universitat de Barcelona. She's a researcher involved in various research projects, also a member of a group which does constitutional studies. She looks at the judicial protection of fundamental rights and freedom as at the processes of political integration, and she's the member of the board of the Association of Spanish Constitutionalists and the editorial director of Agenda Pública. Dear Argelia, you are the only one to have come to Barcelona this evening, this wonderful city to which we all think we have a share, but we don't. So why don't you hear first your view as the closest to the ground? Is this what made Catalonia so exceptional in the last year? Why have you become, after Brexit, our Europe's #1 worry?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you to the Hertie School of Government for this invitation. Well, I didn't know that we were the first worry after Brexit in Europe, so now I'm more worried about what is happening. Anyway, I would like to make a short statement. We have 5 minutes or so, like. And well. I'm a Spanish constitutionalist. Actually, I'm not a specialist in nationalism, but I have been studying the model of territorial organization in Spain, so that's my relation with this subject. And as I said, as a Spanish constitutionalist, I think it's very important to explain what's going on in Catalonia, because actually I think it's not a Catalan problem, but a Catalan and Spanish problem that means that I think we are facing a constitutional and institutional crisis. So that's why I think it's very important to talk about it abroad. It is a constitutional crisis because it affects Catalonia and its self-government, but in fact it's a deeper problem what we are facing here, because it shows the need of a reform, of an update of our constitutional system, of our institutional system. Maybe the most urgent, the most necessary one right now is the Catalan affair. But I think that we should first think about as I said before, the model of territorial organization in Spain. I think that just to give some context, the Constitution of 1978 was written after 40 years of dictatorship, and our constituent, I think they did a good job, but they did what they could in that concrete moment. with such a statement, what I want to say is that after 40 years afterwards, is the moment to change the constitution, because regarding the distribution of power, what the decision taken was to set up some rules, some procedures that could be used for the regions. They didn't know exactly which regions, but by the regions, so they could become autonomous. So the developing of these procedures, these rules, this open system has been the autonomous system, el sistema autonómico, with 17 regions, with self-government, but could have developed in something different, very different. So in that moment, they didn't know exactly the model they wanted to build up. They knew they needed to give an answer to Catalonia and the Basque Country that have always claimed for self-government. So they should give an answer to these two regions, but the rest of Spain was something to see what could happen, how could it be developed. Well, after some years, and because of two political agreements, one in 81 and the second one in 92, the system was closed. And it was decided that the 17 regions should have the same institutional structure and the same competences. So that is what we call, in an ordinary language, coffee for all. Café para todos. So everybody had the same competences, the same institutions. Well, it has been working quite well, I think, this system, but for the last 10 years, every region has reached the top of competences they could get. So that means that, in a way, we could say that the constitution is obsolete in this part of the regulation. So that means that we need, as I said before, an update of this part. But we have a problem in Spain that we don't want, or we don't know how to change the constitution. We have changed it twice, but just to adapt the Spanish constitution to the European Union legal order, but we have not updated our constitution to our necessities, to our needs, to our to our new institutional framework, political parties, and everything. So I think that, first of all, we need a reform of the constitution, a deep reform of this model of territorial organization. We can talk about it later. I can tell you which are the parts or the elements that should be reformed. But I think that we have a more complicated problem, is that we don't have federal culture in Spain. So I don't know if Ignacio agrees with such a statement, but I think that one of the problems we are facing is that the big political parties in Spain, the relevant actors, they do not exactly know already what they want to say when they, or what they have in their minds when they are speaking about decentralization. Because it's not the same to speak about decentralization for the Socialist Party, for instance, in Andalusia, that means in the south of Spain, that's speaking about decentralization in Catalonia by the same political party. So we don't have this federal culture, and we have, and that's a big problem. And then in Catalonia, within this Spanish, let's say, context, two big things, two big aspects, two big phenomenon concord at the same time. One was this judgment of the Constitutional Court saying that a part of our Statute of Autonomy was unconstitutional. I think we need to know that the Statute of Autonomy was passed first by the Catalan Parliament, afterwards by the Spanish Parliament, and afterwards it was ratified in a referendum by the Catalan voters. So it was 3 times re-legitimized. So you know what I mean, no? Okay, I don't want to repeat this word. Anyway, afterwards, the Constitutional Court, after an appeal, and after an appeal of the Popular Party, concluded that some of the statute was unconstitutional, and it was understood by the Catalan citizens as an attempt against the will of the Catalan people, the Catalan citizens. That it was one of the phenomena, and the other one was the crisis, the economic crisis. That I mean, it was. I mean, the sentence of the constitutional, this judgment of the Constitutional Court is in 2010, one of the worst moments of the economic crisis in Spain. So, the Catalan government took advantage of this perfect storm coming from Spain, let's say, and they promised that they would prepare a referendum to see if we could be independent. And afterwards, it began. It was like, I mean, the government, the institutions, and the civil society began a campaign of persuading citizens about the idea that the independence would arrange every problem in Catalonia. And the third element, and I will finish with this, is that at that moment began a clear competition in the electoral field between the party of the president of the Catalan government at that moment, Artur Mas, which is Convergència i Unió, and then with Esquerra, which is the left-wing secessionist party of Catalonia. They began a competition to see who was more Catalan, more secessionist. So these 3 elements, the Spanish economic context, the judgment of the Constitutional Court that was left as against Catalonia, and this new illusion of independence, arranging everything, and the internal competition between these political parties is what I think that led us to the current situation.
Thank you very much for this introduction. Just a short follow-up question, since you are our constitutional expert here. I was rather surprised when in Barcelona last time in December to be given a list with over 40 laws, bills contested only in the last year between the Catalan parliament and the Spanish parliament. Mm-hmm. I mean, regardless if this constitution is good or bad, what I did not understand, as somebody living in Germany, is how can such conflict exist over jurisdiction? Why does the same issue come to be judged twice? And in particular, when you have a left-wing government in Barcelona and a right-wing government in Madrid, it's clearly they will not rule in the same way on electricity companies for a year if they have the right to cut people who don't pay bills in the winter or only in the summer. I mean, but why is this, discussed twice? It seems like an ingredient, directly leading to conflict every day.
Well, it's one of the problems I said before that I mean, we need to reform the constitution because our system of distribution of competences is quite unclear. So, I mean, there is a big space for concurrence between competences because our system of distribution should be a federal one, but it is not, and we have 2 lists in the Constitution, but then every statute is the one setting the final competences chosen by each region. So it's quite tricky. And it has generated during 40 years a big amount of conflicts between Catalonia and Spain, but in general among the regions and the central government. In the last years, in the recent years, these conflicts have increased because of the political situation. So, because in Catalonia we haven't had a left government in the last years. So it was a conservative government, but a nationalist government. And in Spain we have a conservative party, a conservative government, but not. Well, I think they are quite nationalist, but they are not defined as a nationalist party. But I mean, take it into account the context, the basis of this this unclear distribution of competences, and then this permanent conflict, political. This is the problem. The permanent political conflict we are all in now, that has been increased for the last 3 and 2 years. It has provoked a misunderstanding and lack of confidence between the central government and the Catalan government. And the Catalan government, I'm afraid, trying to push and to find the point to conflict, to find the point to find a reaction or an overreaction from the other side. But it has to do, I think, more with the concrete political conflict we are living now.
I see. Thank you very much for this. So basically, this jurisdictional conflict is pushed for political reasons by very active actors. Let me turn now to our Madrid guest, Ignacio Molina, who's one of the most widely known and read foreign policy experts from Spain, and his Royal Elcano Institute, which is also a partner in organizing this evening event and the video streaming that is now going on. So please all behave yourselves. Your mother can see you on television when you think less, okay? And he's going to give us a little bit the view from Madrid. You have to do something to enlighten us here, because honestly, it's very difficult for people to understand why Parliament's rules on the same issues, why Constitutional Court is consulted on the constitutionality of something as important at the very end and not at the beginning before doing all this and things like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much to the Hertie School for organizing this seminar. I'm very happy to be here, and also with other speakers in the round table and with the audience. And yes, I'm a political scientist and a think tanker specializing on European policy. I teach European Union politics and government at the university, and I supposed to be an expert on EU policy, so not an expert on nationalism, not even on Catalonia. Of course, I'm very interested in the Spanish political system, but it's true that in the last 4 or 5 years, this issue has become probably the most difficult topic in the political agenda within Spain, coinciding with the economic crisis, and also with the transformation of the Spanish political system. But it's true that particularly the last year has become a constitutional conflict, and probably the most important challenge the Spanish democracy is facing. So even in the Elcano Institute, we were following the conflict and the European dimension of the conflict and the potential internationalization of the conflict. We finally produced this dossier. I've taken, by the way, some copies, and I've left beside the door, if some of you is interested. That really, well, I'm not able to speak on behalf of Madrid. By the way, I'm not from Madrid. I live in Madrid, I work in Madrid, but I'm not from Madrid. But the point here is that plural states, plural societies are complex to manage. And I very much agree with Argelia in the lack of federal culture. This is not a real problem of Spain, is that to have federal culture is very difficult. And when you have plural societies, not only in Spain, but when you have plural societies in so advanced democracies such as Canada or UK or Belgium, and you have a problem of competition between national identities, as we have in Canada with Quebec, or in UK with Scotland or Northern Ireland, and in the case of Belgium, which is very obvious, it's difficult. It's difficult to manage, even for the most advanced democracies. So here, what basically, how we have constitutional problems, we have also problems of coordination among administration, but we basically have is a problem of how to deal with pluralism and tolerance. I've just read a nationalist, a Catalan nationalist MP in Madrid, a smart one and a not sectarian one. He was asked which has been the main problem or the main mistake made by the Catalan nationalists or during these 5 years of the bid for secession. And he said, and I think this is key, he said that perhaps the Catalan nationalism has not realized the democratic limits in a plural society. And this is basic. I mean, it has to do with to understand how plural your society is and to accept this. And even if you love Catalonia and you feel that Catalonia is your nation rather than Spain, to accept that you live in a plural society, in a democratic society in which you have to accept the other. And it's obvious that according to the polls and according to the feeling of Catalans, of most Catalans, that they feel to be Spanish as Catalan at the same time. And of course, it's a strong national identity in Catalonia. It's obvious that it is. But it has to be managed, this feeling, this sentiment, taking into account that 60%, at least 60% of Catalans feel strongly Spanish at the same time. So it has to do with that. And in Madrid, probably has to be playing as well about pluralism of Spanish society, as pluralism of Spanish state. I really think that Spain has been successful. It's a successful story, not only because of economic convergence with most advanced economies in Europe, not only because of Europeanization, not only because of the modernization of society, but also because from a very centralist state 45 years ago, now we have a semi-federal state or something in which even with all these problems, they are really the power has been decentralized, and we have been able to wield something that has been working, as Argelia has said, more or less. I mean, it worked. It worked for at least 35 years. Of course, with conflict, because Catalan nationalist government had its own agenda of nation building through education, through television, which may be legitimate, but of course. It's very complex to manage when you, at the same time, have a strong national sentiment in the entire Spain. And many Catalans feel Spanish at the same time that the Catalan government is trying to wield an alternative or competitive national identity. So it's obvious that during these years, there has been many conflicts. But the truth is that intergovernmental relations more or less work. And in particular, much more important than that, people in Catalonia live together without conflict. I remember, by the way, that Bill Clinton once said that the Catalan way to live with pluralism was an example for the world. Only, I don't know, 10 years ago, or even less. And suddenly, because of a combination of factors, the economic crisis, also this competition, this bid among Catalan nationalists themselves to demonstrate that they were more Catalan than the other, for perhaps also because of some lack of understanding of the Catalan feeling in Madrid. In particular, when the Popular Party arrives to office, and the Popular Party is a minority party in Catalonia, also the Scottish example at the same time. So this combination of factors that you have the Scotland, that Scots are going to vote for independence, you have a very deep economic crisis, you have some delegitimation of the Spanish political system because of the crisis and because of corruption. So that combination and a very strong bid for secession on the nationalist side try to take advantage of that for that. But at the end, you have the same Catalan society with people who feel Spanish, with most Catalans who feel Spanish, and you start a process unilaterally without understanding of the truth of how your own society is composed, and without any kind of dialogue with the rest of Spain. Not just Madrid, the rest of Spain. We are 17 regions. And so this is really complex, really difficult. Well, we are now in a stalemate. It's very obvious that in the short term, I'm not optimistic at all in the short term, because, well, we are with politicians in custody, with direct rule from Madrid, and it's obvious that in the short term it's going to be very difficult. But let me finish this introduction. But I'm optimistic at least in the long run, because Catalan politicians has to realize that if they love Catalonia, Catalonia is not like they loved as in this nationalist goal to have a nation in which everybody feels Catalan rather than Spanish, and they become independent because of democratic will. This democratic will doesn't exist. There is a democratic will to preserve the Catalan identity, the Catalan language, and the Catalan national feeling, but not to will unilaterally a state. So I really think that they have to. So basically, first of all, it's something that has to be done within Catalonia and within the Catalan nationalist spectrum. That, by the way, when there are regional elections, they normally get 50% of the vote. The last election, last December, 47.5. And when there are national elections, they more or less get 1/3 of the votes. So Catalan nationalism represents 1/3, 1/2 of the Catalan society. So with these numbers, which are very respectable, it's impossible to really to push for something unilateral and something which is so conflictual, considering the rest of the society. But it's true that at the same time, there is the need of an exercise, a reflection in the entire Spain about how to accommodate Catalonia better in Spain. Not just the nationalist Catalonia, I mean the entire Catalonia, and how to renovate this constitutional pact. And this is something that is impossible to do right now. Again, short term, I'm not optimistic, but I'm hopeful that in some years, when there is this exercise also in Catalonia about the plural society, that we can have some progress. So I'm not, in the long run, I'm optimistic.
Thank you very much. I realize now that I actually forgot to mention when we say nationalism, what we mean by this, at least what I mean by this. The definition that I use is a definition of London political science professor Eli Kiduri, who said that nationalism is, in fact, the political ideology which considers that any group which has a specific language and identity is entitled also to a state of its own. And with this, let me move to our third extremely distinguished guest, Professor Sabine Riedel from Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik, who's also a professor at the University of Magdeburg and an expert on European issues, and ask, is this European anxiety over Catalonia justified? Why weren't we so scared when Scotland happened? The Catalonians asked Europe repeatedly to intervene. Madrid suggested repeatedly that Europe should not intervene because this is an internal issue for Spain. How do you see, what should we do and what could we do?
Thank you also for your invitation. And first I want to emphasize I'm coming from Germany, but I have different regional identities because I was born in Eastern Germany, and as a child my parents and with us children moved to the western part of Germany. So I grew up in western Germany, in the Rhineland, and then after I have finished my study, I started my work in Bavaria. So I accepted the Bavarian identity. It's a nice country there. And since more than 15 years now, I'm living in Berlin. So I want to emphasize that also in Germany, we have different regions with different tradition and cultures. So I have prepared an introduction and want to emphasize the European question, the European perspective of this regional conflict. So I want to discuss three key terms or keywords which all separatist parties used, and so they are very important, and there are different interpretations of these terms. I want to discuss the term nation, solidarity, and Europe. So let me start with the question: what is a nation? You have give us an idea. What is nationalism? And so in this connection, I want to emphasize first the meaning of the Catalan regional government. According of the regional government, the 7.5 Catalans form a nation because of their distinct culture and history. Since 2005, it is called for a recognition of this nationhood, and since 2012 for the right of self-determination. In contrast to these demands, the Spanish constitution describes Spain as the fatherland, quota, as the fatherland of all Spaniards. The Spanish nation includes all citizens without distinction and language or religion. So it is mainly defined as a nation created by its own political will and not only by history or culture. However, the Constitution recognizes the existence of linguistic and cultural communities as nationalities, not as nations, but as nationalities. So, Catalan and Spanish identities are not antagonistic concepts. This is very important. What does the international law say? The regional government also has its own views. It does not take into account that only a sovereign has the right for self-determination. And the sovereign is only the population of an internationally recognized state. Consequently, not every part of a population, whether a regional population or a language community, can declare itself a nation and proclaim a state. Now the second term, solidarity. Solidarity with whom? The division of the Spanish nation into Spaniards and Catalans proves even economically difficult, as the Spanish colonial system erupted during the 19th century. The Catalan companies discovered the domestic Spain market. The industrialization in the 20th century finally caused an immigration to Catalonia for all parts of the country. So the labor migration made Catalonia the richest Spanish region today. But Barcelona economically feels strong enough today to form its own state, so that it wants to cancel the solidarity at national level. It argues that Catalonia pays taxes without getting anything in return. But in fact, among the 17 autonomous communities, Catalonia is the richest region, of course, but also the region with the highest debt. So it depends on national solidarity and money from the Spanish Regional Fund. Barcelona claims between 30% and 50% of the whole amount of this regional fund. which are some 7 billion euro per year. Now, what does the pro-European orientation of the Catalan movement mean? It also has fiscal aspects. Barcelona wants full EU membership with a direct access to the funds of the European Central Bank. The question arises now, who will support the other Spanish regions after a secession of Catalonia? Spain would possibly fall back into recession and enter a debt spiral, which will affect the Eurozone or possibly the whole EU. The damage is already foreseen. A recognition of Catalonia will split the EU without solving any problem. Some other European regions are waiting for the moment for a spin-off. Scotland, Northern Ireland, or also even Flanders, where Puigdemont is currently in exile. The remaining centralistic states of the EU would more and more distance themselves from their autonomy arrangements, like Denmark, Italy, or France. This blocks, however, the needed deepening devolution process throughout Europe, and this cannot be in interest of Catalonia. In avoiding these developments, Europe has the duty to discuss its own experiences with alternatives to independence. For Catalonia, this could be more independence or a constitutional reform, as it was mentioned, that either changes the Spanish autonomy system or transforms Spain into a federal system like Germany or Austria. This is also a possible way. Currently, a commission of the Spanish parliament discusses these alternatives. Catalonia should participate in it. So, in conclusion, the Catalans as well as the Spaniards carry a great responsibility for our common future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sabine, and thank you for bringing the money in. Let's not just discuss, cute, posh things as identity, but let's discuss money as well. So let me have a follow-up questions to you, because, what I asked myself when I read all these financial claims, which seem to be an important part of the story, and we're going to hear our Catalan Spanish guests in a second. I asked myself, what happens in Europe, which is defined as a space of redistribution? This is actually the backbone of our regional and cohesion policy. In Europe, richer regions have pledged to help poorer regions in order for convergence, right? And why aren't the German regions, which are on top of redistribution, both in Germany and for whole Europe? Why doesn't Baden-Württemberg want to secede, saying that they are absolutely sick of giving all this money to the rest of us?
Thank you for this question. This question has arisen for times. And there are ideas to reform our federal system, of course. But it is a good system because we have a structure, we have a framework in which we can discuss all these problems. Besides this, it exists in Bavaria, a party, the Bavarian party, who struggles for independence, indeed. And this party was stronger after the end of the Second World War. They get more than 15% in the elections, but nowadays they are not so important. But this party will also participate in these discussions. And so 2 years ago, they demanded also a referendum in Bavaria about the independence question. And our constitutional court has to decide this question 1 year ago. And our Supreme Court, let us say, also decided that this question of an independence of Bavaria should be a question of the sovereign. And as I have mentioned, the sovereign is not only the Bavarian, the sovereign in Germany is the whole population. So this could be. We will have such a referendum maybe in all of Germany. So this is the answer of our Supreme Court, and this was the same answer as in Spain, as the Spanish Supreme Court.
Nevertheless, there doesn't seem to be any mass movement in Baden-Württemberg against the fact that they pay so much money to the rest of Europeans, which is nice and generous.
Solidarity is needed.
Nice and generous of them. So yes, important, the boundaries of the community. Let me ask, immediately on this, the follow-up question to Ignacio, perhaps, because you alluded to the fact that people have a framework in Germany where to discuss this issue, even if they're contentious issues. I heard a lot being said in Barcelona, in fact, that the issue is not solved because it's impossible to have any sort of discussion, that Madrid is fairly repressive towards other regions as well as Catalonia. Only those other regions don't have such a big a voice, don't get such a big publicity, but it was, cited to me a couple who actually stayed on a train line to protest against wrong Madrid policies in Murcia, or I don't know, in another province, right? So why is Madrid perceived as so inflexible? And is there indeed something in the way Madrid, it was compared to me, I talked with Italian friends living in Catalonia, and Madrid is as bad as Rome, all right, which seemed to be for them the end of things. I said, and there's Paris? So no, Paris was passable, whatever. So is there something really in Madrid which makes the situation worse?
Well, I don't know. This is an interesting question regarding how the rest of the country perceive the capital, and I really think that if you ask people from Corsica about Paris, you are going to have the same answer or much worse. And in northern Italy, believe me, I've lived in northern Italy, and the answer regarding Rome is going to be worse. But I really think that answer is connected to some feeling of nationalist feeling, but at the same time some feeling of superiority. In the case of northern Italy, in some cases, in the case of Catalonia, the idea that and it is very much connected to the feeling of Brexiteers with Brussels. So this idea that well, this has to be with this central bureaucracy that sometimes is just nationalist feeling with some progressive clothing, trying to stigmatize the capital as very rigid, and of course Madrid has to be blamed for, I don't know, in this case of the train in Murcia, which is an interesting affair, and I sure probably, but the point is that when people criticize the Spanish democracy, I mean nationalist Catalan or analysts from abroad, I mean, that observers that say, well, the Spanish democracy is not has not accepted the pluralism of the country, and of course, because it's, as I said before, it's difficult. But when you compare Spain with other countries in Europe, there are very few cases in which you can say that that particular country has been more decentralized. And if you think about the capacity of regions to shape public policy in Spain, I really think that this capacity is not negligible. Of course, we've had a political system in which, on the one hand, you have this decentralization on region, and on the other, you have a very strong central executive with a two-party system, so with majoritarian trends. So it's difficult to shape, and without a territorial chamber. This is one of the institutional problems of Spain, that we don't have a real Senate. And of course, it's something that can be discussed and of course can be improved. But I really think that this kind of assessment that Madrid is rigid, that Madrid is not sensible, it makes no sense. And empirically, it can be demonstrated that in the last 40 years, probably the most centralist country in Western Europe in the 70s have become one of the most decentralized. And of course, with several problems, I acknowledge, and I'm blaming many times Madrid also for that rigidity, but really, if you make a real comparison, it happens too. So, for example, the case of the United Kingdom and Spain. I mean, I make this comparison because the connection between Scotland and Catalonia has been very obvious. So Catalonia enjoys many more powers than Scotland in so many issues, including education, broadcasting, health system, territorial organization of Catalonia, police. So it's remarkable. The self-government of Catalonia is really one of the most advanced in Western Europe. And of course, we can discuss about, as in Germany, with Länder discussing about allocation of powers and competence, of course. But I really think that it's not true that Spain is not a real decentralized democracy that has made much progress in the last years, and that what basically we have here is a conflict of two national projects, the Spanish national project and the Catalan national project, fighting particularly within Catalonia. And of course, this has an impact, as Argelia has said, in the entire Spain.
Argelia, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, everybody has talked about his or her origins. I was born in München. So, and I've lived both in Madrid. Yeah, that's why. No. I've lived both in Madrid, in Barcelona, so I've lived both sides of the story. I agree with Nacho. I mean, Spain has a wide evolution. So when we talk about the problems that Spain has and it's facing, it's not because we don't recognize that it is a decentralized country, a very decentralized country, but it's the tools that we have, I think, to solve our conflicts, that we don't have the proper tools to solve these kind of conflicts. One of the issues that should be debated and should be changed, I don't know even if we should touch the constitution, but should be changed is the finance system, the regional financing system. That's true, but not just for Catalonia, for all the regions, because, I mean, one of the things that Catalonia has been saying since the last 2 or 3 decades is that solidarity is too high for Catalonia, because we are giving everything, or we are a rich region, but when we get the money from the state, because we collect taxes, we give it Catalonia. Catalonia collect taxes, we give it to Spain, and then Spain distributes the money. And it has been always said that we receive less than we give. Well, and I understand we need solidarity, but I think we have...
Excuse me, just a follow-up question for us to understand. What is the benchmark? So what would be the ideal combination for you? Whom do you like? Whom do you want to be like? What would be this ideal combination? How much you receive and how much you give? You give less than Madrid, and in Europe, capitals are the richest, and they all redistribute their net, redistributors, because this is it. Its development is led generally by capital cities. They are the most developed European regions. And you do distribute, but you distribute less than Madrid. So where do you want to reach? Where is that ideal barrier which would satisfy you?
I don't know, what do you mean by less distributing?
For instance, you said that you pay more than you get back. That means that there is a benchmark somewhere of how much you would like to pay in taxes and how much you would like to return. Give us an idea of what country do you think does this better and you would like to be like that country.
I wouldn't compare with any other country, but I think that the point would not to have what we call ordinality. I don't know if ordinalidad, I don't know if it's a translation in English, into English. But it would mean that we don't want to be poorer when we get the money than we were before we gave the money. So let's say, like, to respect the ranking of richness before and after having, after distributing the money all across Spain. Because I think we have a problem. Another one is that the Basque Country and Navarra, they have a privileged and special financing system. So they collect, they keep it all, and then they gave a quota, a cupo, to the Spanish government, to the Spanish state. So, and there is a discussion, why do they have such a system? And they have it because it is recognized in the Constitution. No? But why cannot the other regions have such a system? Or why cannot we look for a system more close to the Basque one and not to the general one? So, but I think that the problem is that we don't have a real debate, and as Nacho said it before, among all the communities, the regions, and Spain. And I think one of the big and strong problems we have is that we don't have a recognized structure of collaboration and coordination among communities. So as Germany has a structure, institutionalized relations among the Länder. Among the Länder, and then between the Länder and the Bund, okay? But in Spain, we don't have such a system, and everything depends on the will, on the character, on the color of the party, or of the government. So if the government wants to talk with all the communities and thinks that it is important for the good development of the economy and the regional economy, because it has a sense of a federal sense of economic development, this minister will call every government, every minister of each government. But if the minister doesn't think it is important, he won't do it. So we depend a lot, or exclusively, in the person who is in power in Spain. I mean, regarding the regions. And on the other hand, as Nacho mentioned before, we don't have a real Senate, a territorial representation chamber. So the interest of the regions depend too much in the bilateral relation between a concrete government, regional government, and the central government. So, and I think it is it's a big problem, because it generates unconfidence among the regions, because you always one government, one region, one regional government can think, look, they are getting more money because they are of the same color, or because they have a deal that we don't know, and so without transparency and without managing this pluralistic power we have, no? These 17 regions with 17 parliaments and 17 governments, if they don't talk to each other with transparency and in an ordinary way, in an institutionalized way, I think we create this non-confidence among them and between them.
Okay, I get two things out of it, just to explore them further, to see if we understood you correctly. One is this thing that you said last, which is that actually there is distrust in Madrid as a fair broker across regions, and therefore regions would prefer to deal with one another in terms of, bargaining about money. Only, no?
No, bilaterally with Madrid.
Bilaterally. Mm-hmm.
Bilaterally with Madrid. And the second is that I got, however, the impression that you are in general, however, against redistribution, no? You don't want to give more to other regions than you get? You just think it's excessive redistribution. But that's why I asked, what is excessive redistribution and what is normal redistribution?
I'm not an expert on that, so but that's why I try to point out a an element that has been discussing among experts in Spain, not Catalan, not just Catalan experts, but Spanish experts. I have nothing against solidarity, and I believe in the federal Spain, so I have no problem. But I think that we need a more fair system, and again, a more transparent system, because we don't know the exact accounts, the exact numbers of the other regions. So again, we work by bilateral relations between the region and the central government. But the communication, this multilateral communication, we don't have it.
I suffer terribly hearing this, knowing that there are now good years since, in my other capacity as an anti-corruption expert, we pioneer this online tracking expense systems to the European Commission, which now exists in some countries, in Estonia, in Slovenia, the City of London have this, where you can actually see after 2 weeks everything which is spent and aggregated by region, by school, by hospital, by city, whatever. You know, this seems to be, to me, such a simple matter to solve, you know. It's a matter of technological transparency. Sabine, please.
What we need, I think, is an exchange of experiences in Europe. So our European Union has so many possibilities for such an exchange of experiences. Why do the experts not discuss about these different systems? The autonomy systems in many of the EU member states, and about the federal system. And it is very astonishing that only 3 of the 28 members of the EU have a federal system. This is Germany, Austria, and Belgium. And the other countries are all centralist nations, unitary states, with autonomy systems, but different also. The Spanish model is not the same as, for instance, in Italy or in Denmark or in Romania. We have no autonomy, but there is also a discussion about regional autonomy for Transylvania, but it is also a tricky discussion because there are also nationalists from the side of Hungary, which wants to influence on the policy in Romania by this way. And this is a difficult question today, how to form this autonomy or autonomy arrangements without such problems for the future. And so the Catalan conflict, in my opinion, is really bad for deepening this devolution processes we need in the countries, because every centralist government will say, now we don't want the problem of Spain now with the Catalans. This is a very
rightly so.
Yes, it's right. But we need more participation of the regions. But how to create this? And let me mention also the contradiction and the problem of on the European level. You have mentioned that Spain has developed or has a transformation process since the death of Franco, and this was also the time when Spain was a member of the EU, and this helped in this devolution process. The same is in Great Britain. Also, Great Britain started with the devolution process in the 18th and in the 19th. So, but the result now is that Scotland wants to be independent. Wales is thinking about an independence.
So the question really is,
what is this?
What did
is this
gain?
the result of this reform of the European? It does not. It have not to develop in this direction. It must be better. It has to serve or to defend the unity of the countries.
Well, but we're empiricists. We cannot compare with an ideal. This is how UK did, and you know, the way it did doesn't really encourage many other people. Please, Ignacio.
No, on money. First of all, Catalonia is no longer the wealthiest region in Spain. At relative terms, I mean, GDP per capita is not the richest, as maybe the 5th or 6th, but even in absolute terms, I think Madrid is now richer than Catalonia. And I have to say that we fear some kind of Montreal effect after the unilateral declaration of independence, with the companies leaving the regions and going to the neighbor regions or to Madrid because of the legal insecurity and the instability. So this is something that has to be taken into account, that perhaps in some years Catalonia is not, actually, today is not the richest, and perhaps we have some kind of economic decline. But on the gap between the richest region and the poorest region in Spain, that of course exists, when you compare with other countries in the European Union, you compare with UK, we compare with Italy, even France or Germany, Spain, the gap is much lower. So that means that territorial politics territorial policies in the last years have more or less worked. You look to the public services in South Spain, and much better than in southern Italy, for example. So this is something that is working. Perhaps we don't have a narrative of how successful has been Spain in dealing with, of course, and there are inequalities, but basically the system have worked. On the nationalist discourse about how unfair the funding system is, again, of course, the funding system has many flaws and has to be probably to revisit it. But the truth is that so many lies have been used in these years regarding that. It's very similar, again, to Brexit regarding EU budget. So exactly the same, that you are going to have so much money for your own health system that it really is good business to succeed from Spain, to become independent, because we are going to be, Madrid is a very selfish, of course, feeling. It's very similar to Northern Italy, Lega Nord feeling about the entire Italy. So this is something that has to be underlined. And on the multilateral institutions, that I absolutely agree with Argelia, that we need to will some kind of intergovernmental institutions that works, and the Senate is not working. But there is something to be underlined, that in the case of Catalan and probably the Basque Country as well, what they want is not a multilateral German-style Senate, Bundestag, but what they want is a bilateral privileged relation with the central government, which may be legitimate. I mean, it's like in Quebec, or that because we are a nation, we need a bilateral relation with central government, and we don't want to be in the same room than Andalusia or Galicia because they are not nation and they are okay. But it makes things much more difficult than in Germany. If you have a land or two lender that reject to be part of the Bundestag, it would be a problem. That's what we have in Spain. So this is because when you have a federal system and at the same time you have a pluralism of national identities, it's much more difficult. And Canada is an example. Of course, UK is an example. So when you take into account all those factors, you lead to the conclusion that Spain, despite everything, has not worked so bad. And of course, it's something that we have to, it's basically that we need to talk each other. We have to be much more tolerant. We have to understand that someone in Catalonia don't feel Spanish, or to understand that many people in Catalonia feel Spanish, I mean, for this national. And then when we are, I mean, humble in accepting this pluralism with tolerance, it's much easier to think about institutional solutions. But right now, we are not at that point, I'm afraid. But as I said before, I'm optimistic that at some, in I don't know, 5-10 years, we will arrive to that point of being more constructive.
Oh, well, why don't we start being more constructive tonight? I mean, how shall we arrive at that point? Who's going to take us there? I mean, that it's a bit unclear to us. You know, Europe will not intervene to be the honest broker in this conflict. And there are other examples. You know, the example that is frequently given is that the constitutional modification in Quebec indeed led to the, the tension went down, so it seemed a good solution of the problem. But has this even started? Because right now it seems to me that we are in a period of very radical nationalist mobilization, in which some people actually don't want anything else than to secede, and other people consider that those who want to secede should just go to jail, and that's the answer to this. And how can we go past that? I mean, who are the more, maybe they'll invite the two of you, because obviously I see you're not really going to go into a conflict this evening. Okay, so are there really groups like this who are more neutral-minded and who are seeking for the common grounds? Are these groups really trying these days to build this bridge, to start this constitutional discussion?
I do think so. I mean, even if the solution would be in Nacho's and my hands, I think we could solve it tonight. So, but yeah, I'm afraid it's not
to write our proclamation from Berlin this evening.
It's not the situation, but I mean there are these actually, we have been called equidistance. I don't know if there is.
There must be a very uncomfortable position to be these days,
I know, but I mean, it's because I pretend to be in this equidistance. We have been defending some measures that could have solved in the past, not now, because I think that now the situation, I mean, is we are stuck. There is no. It must be a solution, but we won't find it tomorrow. That's for clear, because I mean the last months in Catalonia, the tension has grown, has increased. There is a division between the citizenship in Catalonia, and that is a big problem. That because the secessionists, they began a movement, they declare unilaterally the independence without having more than half of the population giving them support. So they broke the society. And first of all, we have to reconstruct our society. So that is why I think that we are far from a solution right now. We could have had some solutions some months ago, but not now. And I think that I mean, the people involved, or the people that have been involved, like Puigdemont, even Rajoy, the former president of Catalonia, the current president of Spain, I don't think that they are now, they will be capable of find a solution. They are too involved. They are part, I'm afraid, of the problem. So we cannot count on them to solve the problem. So, but I insist, Nacho, and I think we could solve it. So.
Ignacio, who is not part of the problem? In Belgium, the joke is that it's actually the king of the Belgians who keep together the Wallons and the Flemish, but here the king is very unpopular in Catalonia. So we cannot even turn to the king, who I understand is the distinguished patron of your institute. So who are other neutral, be a wonderful solution, you know. I mean, Catalonians are always enraged when I'll tell them about this Persson and Tabellini finding from their book on economic effects of constitutions, which roughly says he compares a big number of countries, like they're econometrists, and they come with the idea that Spain has been so much an economic success than Greece due to the constitutional monarchy. It's the only factor which plays out, and they even calculate and say, you know, Greece would be as good as Spain if they have kept their king, you know, and that is something that, of course, Greeks don't want to hear, and Catalonians equally. So it's just us, the outsiders, who, you know, look at these figures and say, you know, why doesn't it work? Well, it doesn't. So who are the other groups or people who are recognized by both sides and who could play a role in initiating this constitutional bargaining process?
That's a very good question. Let me think just 1 minute on the monarchy. I don't think I mean, the reason why Spain has evolved better than Greece is the monarchy. But let me just add one thing, one story about the king that demonstrate not particularly something regarding the king, but how Spain has worked in these years. I've read some Catalan nationalist politician praising the Queen of England for visiting Northern Ireland 10 or 15 years after the last killing by IRA, and greeting the nationalist leader of Northern Ireland. But I remember that when the same day, the very day I arrived to Madrid, because I'm not from Madrid, when I arrived to Madrid for studying, that was a terrible killing by ETA, by the Basque terrorist group. And the very day after, the King of Spain in Palace has an interview with the leader of the nationalist Basque radical group supporting ETA, because was in the process of appointing new prime minister. So the very day after. So that means that was, in the case of the United Kingdom, was considered, well, 10 or 15 years after IRA has ceased to kill people, the Queen of England is capable to greet. That was made in Spain during the worst years of ETA killing people. So that demonstrates that when some countries or some people are trying to criticize Spain about lack of tolerance, this is really, you have to.
People are Republican. That's the situation.
Well, no. I mean,
they
it's
don't
not.
Like
my story was not about the king. My story was about how the Spanish political system has coexisted with secessionism and with radical nationalism for many years.
With terrorism, actually.
And with terrorism. So that's something that I think has to be underlined. And when you say that people, I know, I mean, it was people want to send those who want to succeed to jail, it's not true. I mean, there is, because of learning, and that now in Spain, most people, or not to say everybody, accept the fact that in the Basque Country and Catalonia, you have people who are secessionists. The question is not the ideology, the question is that they want to become independent unilaterally and without even the majority of the Catalan or the Basque society, which is quite different. So, well, but on your question about how to start this process, I really think is, as I said, in the short term is difficult, that some process of some kind of... The last 5 years with this bit of independence has been interesting because I really think that in both sides, I mean in the Catalan nationalist side and also in the rest of Spain and the rest of Catalonia, there has been a learning process about that this feeling is very strong, the feeling of being Catalan, but at the same time, that not strong enough to impose views. And at the same time, in the Spanish side, to realize that there is a problem of accommodation. So the first, I think that as I said, I'm optimistic because I really think that people realize that problem, how difficult the problem is, and how strong both positions are. That the Spanish state is strong, that the Spanish identity, Spanish feeling in Catalonia is also very strong. So when all actors involved, after some years of this process of reflections, lead to the conclusion that the only solution is some kind of bargaining, some kind of quid pro quo. So if the solution is connected to give more power to Catalonia in the Spanish political system, more recognition to the plural sentiment of national sentiment in Spain and some kind of symbolic recognition, protection of the Catalan language, well, okay, there's room for these kind of things, but with a quid pro quo in Catalonia, within Catalonia, that the Catalan political system, the Catalan national project, had to also to recognize that Catalonia is plural, that the Spanish language has to be part of the Catalan public sphere. But by the way, there are many more people in Catalonia speaking Spanish than Catalan, but Catalan is the only language in public space, I mean, official public space. or the dominant language. For example, when a member of the Catalan parliament speaks in Spanish, in the Catalan parliament, they are the nationalists criticizing, blaming that particular politician for speaking Spanish. Even Spanish is the most widespread language in Catalonia. So there is something that has to be really, and that's why I'm optimistic, because on the one hand, because I really think that at the end actors are rational, actors understand that they are not strong enough, actors understand that they have to coexist in a plural society, in a democratic, and that there's some kind of change, there's some kind of quid pro quo between the entire Spain and Catalonia. That's why I'm optimistic. But it's going to be very difficult. And we don't have right now those entrepreneurs to promote that kind of solution. But I really think that right now there is no momentum. But perhaps in 2, 3, 4 years, I want to be optimistic, and I really think that it's going to be to constitutional reform. But it's going to be difficult, but I mean, there is at the end physics. The social reality is not going to change. The Catalan pluralism is not going to change, and the pluralism of the Spanish society is going to is something that, if you look to electoral behavior in the last 40 years, is very constant. I mean, those who vote for Catalan nationalism, those who vote for the right, for the left, is very stable. So that means that in 10 years, in 20 years, it's going to be quite similar. So political actors have to be rational, have to be democratic, I hope, and then when we are at that moment, there will be momentum for that kind of bargaining, but not now.
Okay, let's open up for questions from the audience. Aaron, please. Just please state your name when you speak first time. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Aaron Burnett, and I'm a Hertie School alumnus. And having spent the last year or two also in London and looking at the situation of Brexit, I'm seeing a common thread in European actions, which simply is we need to prove that membership matters. So support of the Irish border, even Spain asking for clarification over Gibraltar in the last couple of days, et cetera, et cetera. So with that in mind, with that context, that Europe needs to prove that membership matters and that it will stand by its member states on existential questions, should the situation in Catalonia deteriorate, how sustainable is the current European course of action, which is to simply insist that it isn't going to intervene and that's it? How sustainable is that if the situation changes?
Thank you, Aaron. Sabine, I'll come to you because that's actually directly your conclusion.
And I have a quota for you because in 2014 there was the referendum in Catalonia as well as in Scotland about independence of these regions. And at that time, the Commission answered what will be with the regions if they declare the independence. And Viviane Reding, the EU Commissioner for Justice and the Deputy Commission, the Deputy of the President of the EU Commission, wanted a quota. A few seconds after voting for independence, Catalonia would be outside the Union. This is the legal framework of all these. It could be outside the Euro system. Catalans would no longer have EU citizenships. These are clear answers to what is the case after the declaration of the independence, and that would be the reason that Puigdemont has signed the independence declaration, but has not declared independence. So it is a situation. It's not clear what is juridically the fact, and so we have to discuss about these problems. It's a European problem.
But if I can push Aaron's question a little bit, I mean, clearly, simply the more communication on this would have been better because people were completely disinformed. very few people really genuinely believed in Catalonia that Europe is going to acknowledge them, and it was a bad surprise for them that not. So this was simply, didn't reach enough people. And then, we just ended with the idea that there are no honest brokers to initiate this constitutional conflict, maybe on a more modern stage, just modest scale, just to initiate this conflict, unless, we consider that this would actually lead to worse. It would be seen as the beginning of a process at which end secession is possible. So I would understand why not, but I think it should be considered. I think it is a fair point, because people are not going to demobilize. And here I disagree with Ignacio, people are rational. One of the most extraordinary things about nationalism when I was studying it, and I was studying the former Yugoslavian conflict and Transylvania, is the altruism in nationalism. People make sacrifices. I mean, you can see in this other kind of battles, with jihad and everything. People really make sacrifices for self-esteem and for collective identities. Identities are subjective, but as long as people enroll and go and get killed for them, this is not something that we would call rational. Right? So, once people are mobilized in this area, we have to consider this factor and think how we deal with it. Please.
Yeah, but just adding a question, the problem is that the secessionists have been lying for months to the Catalan population. And one of these,
as he says, as in Brexit, some people
one of these big lies was the question about we will stay in the European Union because the Catalan secessionists, they want to stay in the European Union. So I think that Viviane Reding's answer was not for a Catalan, well done, agreed and democratic split up from Spain, but of an unilateral way to do it. So if you don't follow the legal and the democratic path, you will be outside because you won't have the opportunity to negotiate with the European Union. So, but instead in Catalonia, you still, if you speak to people on the street, they will say, yes, we would be in the European Union because the government keeps saying that. So, but I mean, the rational politics nowadays, I don't know if they go together.
And even, cognitive sophistication and exposure to different sources. I forgot to tell you that I'm Romanian, and one of the funniest things that I liked on this is that people were writing on my blog, I only wrote once on Catalonia, Romanians living in Barcelona, and saying, but they are in favor of secession too, and they want to be independent, I hope they were Romanian and not some, Putin-paid trolls on the internet, but I'm assuming they were Romanian. And I said, yes, really, why? I engaged, and they said, because after next day, we're not going to pay tax anymore. So then why not have? Then they really believe that.
No, on Europe, I really think that Europe has behaved correctly during the crisis to support the interpretation of the Spanish constitutions made by the Spanish institutions, not just the government, because, well, it's very easy to say, well, this is the conservative government of Prime Minister Rajoy. Yes, it is, but the Senate voted 80% of the senators, or more than 80% of the senators, in favor of direct rule, Article 155. The Constitutional Court has made so it's how the Spanish Constitution has been interpreted by the Spanish political system, the executive, legislative, and the Constitutional Court and the judiciary. The European Union has to respect that. The European Union has to assume that a member state is capable to deal with this kind of constitutional conflicts. And I really think that when the former Catalan president Puigdemont was asking for a mediation, was not honest call for mediation. It was not mediation regarding the conflict. It was a mediation for having a binding referendum right now, or even to recognize that we already are a republic. So in terms of, in the very unlikely event that the European Union is involved in the crisis, let's imagine that. I really think that it's much better not to do it, and I think that things has been much better this way. But in the unlikely case, considering the conflict, what I foresee is that the European Union was going to suggest some kind of concessional power-sharing arrangement within Catalonia. Not a solution between Madrid and Catalonia, but basically that considering the pluralism of Catalan society to introduce. So if, for example, you think on the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland, about not two different groups with very strong ethno-territorial identities, and the only solution to Northern Ireland has been some kind of concessional arrangement. It's very difficult to implement, but at the end, the only one when you have those so sectarian divisions. But in the case of thinking Brussels, less dramatic than Northern Ireland, Brussels or Belgium in general, some kind of concessionalism within Catalonia. But it's so difficult to figure out that the European Union is going to impose some kind of solution close to what nationalists have in mind. So a binding referendum on secession, because it's something that it's impossible to accept that the European Union is going to do that. So basically my view is that the European Union has to respect the constitutional identity of member states. The European Union has no competences at all on that. And of course, behind the scenes, has to send inputs to the Spanish government to be smart in dealing with the situation, of course. And of course, in 1st of October, when the mock referendum was held, there was, in my view, perhaps the intervention of police was really disgusting. And was probably could be managed much better. But well, this is something that has to do with police intervention in all advanced democracies, that from time to time we have this kind of images. But apart from that, the European Union has to respect, has to align with the constitutional Spanish system. In terms of respect for rule of law, respect for the role of the parliament, the role of the courts. I really think that if we analyze carefully what happened in Catalonia after summer, probably what happened in the Catalan parliament 6th and 7th of September, when without any respect to the Catalan home rule and of course the Spanish constitution, the majority imposed unilaterally a new interpretation. So this is something that if we are concerned about rule of law in some member states, what happened in the Catalan parliament was really something that we have to be worried about. Of course, if the Spanish government, which in my view has not been the case, if the Spanish government or the Spanish institutions are not respecting the Spanish constitution in terms of pluralism, respect for minorities and for the Catalan identity, of course, I really think that according to the treaty, there are some tools to do that. But we are not at that situation at all.
I'm getting back my memories from the Yugoslav time. Forgive me. I hope that this stays completely civil and there's absolutely no connection. However, there were moments when there was nobody to intervene, absolutely nobody to intervene. Outsiders were no longer trusted. We have bombed Belgrade, so who would speak with us, outsiders, Europeans? And some extraordinary civil society movements happened. The most extraordinary that I remember was the movements of mothers of soldiers enrolled from the 3 different countries, which they created marches and walked from Belgrade to Sarajevo, and things like this. Someone from civil society to emerge as some sort of intermediate. It's quite impossible for a problem to be solved if there are really no entrepreneurs trying to, go between parties and start some sort of mediation process. I am a bit depressed hearing there's nobody to do that. Anyway, let's take a few more questions before we return to the panel.
I'm Reem. I'm a Hertie student, first year MPP, and I have a question regarding the role of the Constitutional Court as a broker. In the very beginning of the discussion, we were talking about, so the subject matter came to the Constitutional Court so late, and how do you envision so far from now onwards the role of the Constitutional Court in the matter?
let's take a few more questions.
My name is Sophia. I'm Portuguese, and I'm also an MPP student. I have a specific question, which kind of is something that someone else asked, but you are not speaking about any concrete solutions right now. And as time goes by, it seems to me, as someone who lived right next door and everything seemed fine for decades, that this is getting worse and worse right now. So maybe in the long run, it will get better. But how do you fix the stalemate now? Because it feels to me that this is the big pink elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about, but the one that is becoming a serious issue.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? Yes, please, sir, here.
Thanks. My name is Erik Jensen. I'm coming from a newspaper in Denmark, and just two small questions. Some of the politicians who are in prison now from Catalonia are threatened with very long sentences, like 30 years, like they were really bad terrorists. Does this mean that there are political prisoners in Spain, or how do you view that? That's one thing. And the other thing is this paragraph 155 that you just mentioned is still on in Catalonia, and it was not possible to form a government, as far as I understand, a few weeks ago. So how do you view that? How long can this go on, and how do you see the possibilities of forming a government? And a third question is mainly for you. Of course, it's easy to say that the European institutions and the European Union must be against us, as Ignacio just said. But on the other hand, isn't the criticism of the European Union not exactly that it doesn't listen to the people? And maybe there are people in Catalonia that actually wants independence, that is not only some kind of fake news or some kind of lies that the separatists tells us. So could the European not listen for once to the people here and maybe actually act on behalf of the people?
Thank you very much. I take one last question here to the right, and then I return to the panel and we end.
Quick question following up of what Sofia just said about short-term solutions. They might be one, which is a legal referendum that is accepted by the state. And if I'm not wrong, well, I think I read Argelia writing some articles in Spanish about the possibility of doing it without changing the constitution. But I'm afraid that Ignacio is not so in favor of that, so I would be interested in knowing that concrete short-term solution.
Okay, thank you. Just remember the earlier discussion. The question is, who should vote in this referendum? Where do you bound the community? Everybody who has a right? I mean, the other people of Spanish, or just the Catalonians? That's the bone of content, right? And the results could not be more different. All right, we return to the panel. You want to start, please?
Yeah. Regarding
the constitutional question, is the Constitutional Court a broker or an actor, actually?
I think the Constitutional Court has been involved. I mean, the government, the present Spanish government has misused the Constitutional Court as an excuse to not take any political solution for the problem. So the Constitutional Court has been taking decisions that should have been taken by the government. So that's why I think that our present Spanish government has how would you say that, has not taken the responsibility of managing in a political way the conflict, and has gone, has used the Constitutional Court on the one hand, and on the other is not using, but trusting in the criminal courts to see how all these offences, these supposed offences, develop. But again, I think the Constitutional Court should have been more to a side, because I think it has gone too involved, and its institutional position, I think it has been touched. So we have a problem. We will have to deal with the position of the Constitutional Court for the following months and years, I think so. And then about the political prisoners, no, there are not. I mean, they are political people that have defended their ideas in a non-democratic way. So, I mean, they have not respected the rights and freedoms of the rest of representatives. They have violated, or they have not-respect the rights of more than a half of the citizenship of Catalonia, and they have followed an unconstitutional way to defend their ideas, and then so they have used the wrong way to defend them. So it's not because of the ideas, but because of the way they have defended them. Another thing is that if they should be in prison, in jail right now, because I think it might be a bit disproportionate that they are now in I don't know, in provisional jail, but that doesn't mean that they are political prisoners. So it's different. I mean, the judge might be wrong, but it is not a political prosecution. And about the referendum, I have been defending the referendum for the last 4 or 5 years, a legal, non-binding referendum among Catalans, because I think it's not a referendum for independence, but it should be a referendum to see which is the view of each of the Catalans regarding the accommodation of Catalonia in Spain. So we should go to a referendum, or we should hold a referendum, but before there should be an offer of a real and honest reform of the Constitution. So the Spaniards, I mean, as said, I feel Spaniard as I feel Catalan, so. But to understand the situation, Spain should offer an honest and real reform of the Constitution, and then the secessionists should show the real consequences of secessionism. But because, as I said before, the secessionists have been using lies as a tool to convince, to persuade the citizens. So, and I don't think they have said, no, but we have the electoral polls to know what Catalans want. No, it's not the same electoral poll that a referendum. It has nothing to do. And again, we should have a real campaign, because the non-referendum that was celebrated the 1st of October, it was held after a non-campaign, because, I mean, the non-voters were not doing campaign, so it was not a real referendum. So non-binding, that's important, non-binding, because if it should be binding, it should be for the whole Spaniards, to the sovereign, to the people of Spain, but it is not the case. So it's a not binding, legal and agreed referendum between Catalan and Spain, but again, after an honest campaign and with honest proposals.
Thank you. This is finally a constructive proposal. So a non-binding consultative referendum in which a moderate solution, so we would have, I understand, 3 solutions: a status quo, a moderate offer from the government of Spain, and the extreme solution, the secession. Would you agree to that?
Short answer, no. But I'm not against referendum, but
we don't like them on the other hand.
Well,
less and less in your opinion.
I'm not against, but depend on the referendum. It's in the case of a divided society such as Catalonia. I agree that the referendum has to, perhaps, if there is a referendum, has to be done first in Catalonia, and then perhaps in the entire Spain. But a referendum in which you are asked leave or remain, yes or no, is so divisive that for the divided society when the society is divided for identity, language lines, is really very problematic. If we are thinking on other cases in which we have this kind of conflict, we think, I don't know, in Northern Ireland, Cyprus, Belgium, nobody really suggests to manage this kind of conflict in those territories, to have a referendum about secession of Northern Cyprus, or secession of Flanders, or the point is that when you have the society so divided, what you need is some kind of consensual agreement. And when the representative of the politicians, this is a job for politicians, when the representative of the pluralism of society reach some kind of agreement, mutually accepted, this solution, in my view, has to be called a referendum to ratify that solution. But not a referendum on I feel Spanish or I feel Catalan, because it would be much worse to have it. And even we have the president of Quebec or the president of Scotland. Hugo said that it would be a short-term solution. Well, we know that after the first referendum on Scotland, the first referendum in Quebec, the conflict has not been solved. The conflict continues and has been referendum in which, in the case of Scotland or in the case of Quebec, we don't have really a so divided society by language and identity. Because in the case of Scotland, 100% of Scots feel they are Scots nationally, so there's no real problem of conflict. And in the case of Quebec, we have about 80% of people in Quebec are French-speaking, feel Quebec as a nation. So in the case of Catalonia, it's much more difficult, much more tricky. You have basically a society torn in two. So referendum, yes, a referendum on an agreement, not a referendum to disagree. But this is my view, and I really think that the proposal of referendum was not honest. The proposal of referendum was to have a precedent. Even if the referendum, the result of the referendum is what all opinion polls show, that there is no real consistent majority for secession in Catalonia, but for nationalists, is a very good outcome because they have the precedent. Well, we had a referendum, so we can repeat it in the future. So the stress to the Spanish semi-federal system that this kind of precedents introduce, in my view, would be very damaging for the entire Spain, but also for the people in Catalonia. So much better, and considering the precedent of Brexit, so we have to be very cautious with the tool of referendum. But yes, what politicians have to do is to do their job, to negotiate, to discuss, to exchange views. And when they have a solution, a mutually acceptable solution, go for a referendum to ratify that solution. I think this is the way to do, and to change the Spanish constitution if needed.
Thank you. Sabine, the last word to you as the most.
Yeah, thank you. I would at last mentioned that the Catalonian conflict is a European one. And we have to discuss more about the consequences of this development. You are right, we don't have to influence into the Spanish problems inside, but we have a position, interpretation of what we want Spain developed in the future. It cannot be that the results of this conflict will be in responsibility of all the Europeans. Yeah? In 2012, there was the finance crisis. The European Central Bank gave Spain money in amount of 40 billion euro to solve the financial crisis. And now, only the Catalan conflict now costs 1 billion to the end of the last year. Only for 3 months, damage, I will say, of 1 billion. And who pay the costs? At last. And so it is a conflict which concerns whole Europe, I think. And so we have to pay attention what is going on in Spain today, not only when Puigdemont says something or not. We have to look at this conflict every day. is it possible to have a solution about the Commission? There is a Commission. I have mentioned the Commission in the Parliament, and they are. It's not working. Why? Yeah, I want, as a European citizen, I want to know why is the Commission not working. There are. I read in the newspaper there are different concepts how to solve different concepts. Why is it not possible to discuss it openly? And I'm interested as a European citizen, and I know that there is a difficult to have a new budget for this year. The central government is not able to have a new household because the Basque party want other ideas. They want to finish or to solve the Catalan problem without a conception. Yeah, we need time that there is a discussion about the future. If there would be more autonomy to the Catalans, or could it be a reform for all other regions? I am missing the problems of the other of Andalusia, of Murcia. There are other regions in Spain, and they are also need the help and yeah. So I want to say it's not only a Catalan question; it's a question of the whole country. In which direction will it develop? And so I will finish with the answer. We have to think about the European dimension.
Okay, so keep monitoring Catalonia. This is what I take out of it. And let me just say this thing in the end. When there is no obvious solution brokered by someone, some solutions exist which will impose themselves, because there are some trends which are materializing there, right? And one trend which seems to me it's materializing is that radicals are eliminated in order for moderates perhaps to reach an agreement. If I get it, this is a little bit of what is going on. It's a traditional way of solving ethnic conflict. I would not really see it emerging in postmodern Europe, but you know, this is how it works. Let's be realistic. We are in a policy school. Let's thank our panelists. Let's thank our panelists and the whole audience for these great questions.